Hey folks, so today we are going to look at the editorial page of the Economic Times newspaper. Today is 5th of March, and we have these many articles. So, first one being Dodge the current great again trap. Shall we do tax our way? Third is his bite is worse than his bark. We will go with this one. His bite is worse than his bark. In January, Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico. He then backed off and postponed action for a month. Trump proposed a 10% tariff on China against the 60% he had suggested in the election campaign. So, Wall Street veterans concluded that Trump was all bark and no bite. Alas, what illusions. On Monday, Trump went ahead with 25% tariffs on his neighbors and raised his tariffs on China to 20%. He proved that his bite was worse than his bark. Ditto on the geopolitical scene. During the election campaign, he promised a quick peace in Ukraine. After assuming power, he initially did nothing drastic. Then, after a 90-minute talk with Vladimir Putin, he declared they had agreed on a peace deal and the Ukraine and Europe would have to fall in line. At a stroke, he destroyed NATO's philosophy and its rationale. So, in the UN, he teamed up with Russia and China against the Europe on Ukraine. He treated Volodymyr Zelensky with contempt that their White House meeting. Zelensky was thrown out when he was refused to be cowed. An enraged, vindictive Trump has now suspended military aid to Ukraine without consulting NATO. Once again, his bite has been worse than his bark. So he has transformed world politics and economics so drastically that many analysts can scarcely believe what they are seeing. Trump is a bully on the rampage, determined to hammer all others into submission without even offering them the courtesy of a consultation. He loves to show his muscle by humiliating and trampling on everyone, including his closest allies. With this display of toughness, yield great dividends and make America great again. The very opposite seems likely. Treating Putin an ally and Europe as a foe has no political logic. He cannot make America great again by forcing Ukraine to submit to Russia. Cannot break old economic and political bonds with Europe without serious consequences for the US. He is certainly right in saying that Europe has not contributed enough to NATO spending, but joining hands with Putin is no sort of alternative. Trump is so erratic and volatile that nobody knows what he will do next or even what exactly he wants. He says he wants to make America great again, but his actions ensure the opposite. What is going on in his head? So, analysts are looking for some method in his madness, but all explanations are superficial and implausible. Some theorize that Trump wants to return an earlier era where great powers divided the world into zones of power. This would imply the US dominates the Americas, Russia dominates Europe, and China dominates Asia. This sounds too bizarre to be true. Anyway, Russia is far too weak to dominate all Europe or China to dominate all Asia. What we see is madness about method. The initial received wisdom was that countries should attempt to mollify Trump and avoid a trade war, but he has been so brutish and offensive that even timid Canada is now up his arms. State Premier Doug Ford of Ontario has threatened to cut off electric supplies to the US with a smile on my face. Mexico and China are going to retaliate. China can target US agricultural products that will hit Trump in the Midwest states where he typically wins easily. China is a major importer of feed grains, notably soybeans and maize, to produce pork. It will import from Latin America instead. So Europe is also incensed by Trump's humiliation of NATO and will not keel over quietly. It will retaliate with tariffs and will not roll back taxes dislikes such as VAT and taxes on the revenue of tech giants. He was elected partly because of high inflation under Joe Biden, but raising tariffs and expelling cheap Latino labor will accelerate inflation. US businesses will not respond by investing heavily in steel and aluminum because not even tariffs and expelling cheap Latino labor. US businesses will not respond by investing heavily in steel and aluminum because not even tariffs of 25% will offset the high cost of US labor and electricity. Such investments are made on long term considerations and Trump will be president for only 4 years. So in sum, Trump's action will slow world trade and GDP. The worst case scenario will be the bursting of the US stock market bubble. The US market is highly overvalued by historical standards. Its price book ratio, cyclically adjusted, is 5.2 against 1.8 in Japan, 1.6 in Britain, 1.3 in China, and 1.0 in South Korea. That indicates how far it can fall. US bond and equity markets have fallen since Trump became president. If this trend continues, there could be a serious rout. So, will this persuade Trump to reverse course? Very unlikely. His ego will not permit retreat. In which case, we must be prepared for a major crash in US markets that will hit all countries, including India. This is far from certain, but is definitely possible. The future looks dark. It is difficult to see a silver lining. So, here the author is trying to uh, say the consequences of what the actions are being done by the US president, and this is going to impact India as well. So that is all. Thank you.